Hello, this is Dr. Annette Moultrie, and thank you for visiting my channel. Also, thank you again for watching my videos. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thank you.
We are starting this segment on process costing. This is part 1 of process costing. The learning objectives are describe the flow of costs through a process costing system, calculate equivalent units of production for direct materials and conversion costs, prepare a production cost report for the first department using the weighted average method, or prepare a production cost report for subsequent departments using the weighted average method. 5, prepare journal entries for a process costing system. 6, use a production cost report to make decisions. And finally, 7, prepare a production cost report using the first in, first out method, or FIFO. So let's begin with learning objective 3.1. Describe the flow of costs through a process costing system. Job order costing is an accounting system that accumulates costs by job. It is used by companies that manufacture unique products or provide specialized services. In contrast, other companies use a process costing system. A process is one of a series of steps in manufacturing production. A process costing system is an accounting system that accumulates costs by process. It is used by companies that manufacture identical units through a series of uniform production steps or processes. Both job order and process costing systems, they track the product cost of direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead through the 3 inventory accounts on the balance sheet: raw materials inventory, work in process inventory, and finished goods inventory. Now, the primary differences between job costing and process costing are how and when costs are recorded in work in process inventory. Job order costing has one work in process inventory account with a subsidiary ledger containing individual job cost records for each job. Costs are transferred to finished goods inventory when the jobs are completed. Process costing has a separate work in process inventory account for each process or department. Here you see in Exhibit 3-2, it illustrates Puzzle Me's manufacturing operations. So Puzzle Me, it's fictitious. It's a fictitious jigsaw puzzle manufacturing company. It divides its manufacturing operations into 2 processes: assembly and cutting. Now, the assembly department applies the glue to the cardboard and then presses a picture onto the cardboard. The department cuts the cardboard into puzzle pieces and packages the puzzles in a box. Box is then moved to the finished goods storage. The jigsaw puzzles accumulate production costs during each process. The company then assigns these costs to the puzzles passing through that process. So at this company, Puzzle Me, each process is a separate department. So here you see in the assembly process, you have direct materials, direct labor, and then you have manufacturing overhead. In the cutting process system, you have direct materials, you have direct labor, and then you have manufacturing overhead. Whereas with the assembly process, it deals with the cardboard, the picture, the glue. The direct labor are the workers operating the pressing machine. Whereas with the cutting process, you have workers operating the cutting machines. At any moment, some puzzles are in the assembly process and others are in the cutting process. Computing the puzzles cost becomes more complicated when the units are at different places in the production cycle. So here you see, suppose the company's production costs incurred to make 50,000 puzzles and the costs per puzzle are as follows. You have the assembly, the total cost is $220. Cost per puzzle is $4.40. The cutting is $45,000. Cost per puzzle during that process is 90 cents. So the total cost is $65,000. And the cost per puzzle with both the assembly and cutting process is $5.30. So total cost to produce 50,000 puzzles is the sum of the cost incurred for the two processes, which is $265,000. The cost per puzzle is the total cost divided by the number of puzzles. That's the 265,000 divided by 50,000 puzzles, which will give you the $5.30 per puzzle. Companies use process costing to determine the per unit cost in order to control costs, set sales prices, and calculate account balances for work in process inventory, finished goods inventory, and cost of goods sold. Here you see in Exhibit 3-3, it compares cost flows in a job order costing system for Smart Touch Learning and a process costing system for Puzzle Me company. Here you see in panel A, it shows that a job order costing system has a single work in process inventory supported by an individual job cost record for each job. You have job 27, 28, 29, okay? Panel B here, it summarizes the flow of cost for a process costing system. So you see that costs flow through the work in process, inventory assembly account before going to the work in process inventory cutting account before it goes to the finished goods inventory and then to the cost of goods sold. Learning Objective 3.2. Calculation for direct materials and conversion costs. What are equivalent units of production and how are they calculated? Well, companies may have products still in process at the end of the accounting period. The total production costs incurred in each process must be split between the units that have been completed in that process and transferred to the next process, and the units not completed and remaining in work in process inventory. Here at Exhibit 3-4, it illustrates the point that all costs must be accounted for. or be transferred to the next department. So again, all costs must be accounted for. They either remain in the department or transferred to the next department. Equivalent units of production, or EUP, is used to measure the amount of materials added to or work done on partially completed units and is expressed in terms of fully complete units. So you have, again, the equivalent unit of production, the EUP. It measures the amount of materials added to or work done on partially completed units during a period. It is expressed in terms of fully complete units of output. And the conversion costs are the sum of direct labor and manufacturing overhead costs, and it represents the cost to convert direct materials into finished goods. Assume that the company Puzzle Me has 40,000 units that the assembly department completed and transferred out. Okay. The equivalent units would be 40,000 units times 100% complete. That would be for both direct materials and conversion costs. So Puzzle Me, they ended the accounting period with 10,000 units in the assembly department's work in process inventory. The 10,000 units were 100% complete for direct materials and 25% complete for conversions. In terms of equivalent units of production, the 10,000 partially completed units are equal to 10,000 EUP for direct materials and 2,500 EUP for conversion costs. Now, this example illustrates an important point. That is, the equivalent units of production can be different. It can be different for direct materials and conversion costs, and therefore must be calculated separately. Learning objective 3.3. Prepare a production cost report for the first department using the weighted average method. So how is a production cost report prepared for the first department? How is a production cost report prepared for the first department? For a comprehensive example of a process costing system, let's look at the company Puzzle Me. Here you see in Exhibit 3-5, it illustrates the two major production process. In the first process, the assembly department applies glue to the cardboard and then presses a picture onto the cardboard. Then the cutting department cuts the board into puzzle pieces and packages the puzzles in a box. Box is then moved to finished goods storage. Production process uses materials, machines, and labor in both departments. And there are two work in process inventory accounts. One for the assembly department, and the other is for the cutting department. We are going to complete a lot of calculation in this chapter. So as you work through the computations, keep the picture in Exhibit 3-4 in mind so you don't confuse inputs with outputs. Remember, the inputs are the materials, labor, and overhead. The outputs are the completed puzzles. So the cost of producing puzzle flow, they are the cost of direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. And they are entered on the work in process inventory for assembly. Materials, cardboard, picture. Direct labor and labor, manufacturing overhead, glue, maintenance on the pressure machines, and so on. Now, these costs are on the production cost report for assembly. And the following costs, they flow from the work in process inventory for assembly to the work in process inventory for cutting, as reported on the production cost report for cutting. And then the cost, then it flows from the work in process inventory for cutting to the finished goods inventory. A production cost report must be completed for each department. The production cost report shows the calculations for the physical flows and the cost flows of the products. There are 4 steps in preparing a production cost report. The first step is to summarize the flow of physical units. The next step is to compute output in terms of equivalent units of production, or EUP. The third step is to compute the cost per equivalent unit of production. And the fourth is to assign costs to units completed and units in process. 2 unique terms are used on a production cost report. To account for. To account for includes the amount in process at the beginning of the period plus the amount started or added during the period. Accounted for, it shows what happened to the amounts to account for. They are either still in process or completed and transferred out. Now, these terms are used for both units and costs. To account for and accounted for must always equal. The assembly department, it applies glues to the cardboard and then presses a picture onto the cardboard. Operation for this department includes 2 inputs. One is the direct materials, which are the glue and the cardboard. They are added at the beginning of the process. The conversion costs are added evenly throughout the process. The assembly department data for July is summarized here on this slide. So for the assembly department, you have the units, and then you have the costs. Okay. You have the beginning work in process, started in production in July, 42,000, transferred out in July, 40,000, ending work in process, units, don't know, the percent completed, direct materials, 100%, conversion cost, 25%. And then also you have the cost. The assembly department had 8,000 units in process on July 1st, and they started out with 42,000 units during the month. Therefore, to account for is 50,000 physical units. So they started out with 8,000 units. And they had 8,000 units in process on July 1st, and they started out with 42,000 units during the month. So they will account for 50,000 units. The assembly department completed the assembly process of 40,000 of the 50,000 units to account for and transferred those units to the cutting department. Therefore, the remaining 10,000 units must still be in process, and we have to account for all of those units. So to account for, you have the 50,000 units, and accounted for, you have the 1,000 units. And remember, we said to account for and accounted for, they must equal. So therefore, they are equal. We are ready to record this information on the production cost report. So Exhibit 3-6 that you see here, it shows units to account for and units accounted for. Notice that we are completing the units section of the report. The unit section. At this point, we are not yet assigning costs to units. The assembly department worked on 50,000 puzzle boards during July. We have already determined that 40,000 puzzle boards are completed and have been transferred to the next department. If they are completed and transferred out, then they are 100% complete for both direct materials and conversion costs in this department. The 10,000 puzzle boards are only 25% complete. Equivalent units of production for direct materials total 50,000 because all the direct materials have been added to all 50,000 units worked on during the month of July. Because the direct materials are added at the beginning of the process, if the units are started, then 100% of the materials have been added. We have completed units at 40,000 units times 100% will give you the 40,000 EUP for direct materials. And in process units, 10,000 units times 100% is equal to 10,000 EUP for direct materials. So the total EUP for direct materials is equal to 50,000 EUP for direct materials. The assembly department worked on 50,000 puzzle boards during July. We have already determined that 40,000 puzzle boards are completed and have been transferred to the next department. So if they are completed and transferred out, then they are 100% complete for both direct materials and conversion costs in this department. So another 10,000 puzzle boards are only 25% complete. So the conversion costs are 100% complete, for the 40,000 puzzle boards completed and transferred out to the cutting department, but only 25% of the conversion work has been done on the 10,000 puzzle boards in ending work in process inventory. So you have the completed units at 40,000 units times 100%, which will give you the 40,000 EUP for conversion cost. And the in-process units, 10,000 units times the 25% completion, right, will give you only 2,500 EUP for conversion cost. So the total EUP for conversion cost is 42,500 EUP for conversion costs. Exhibit 3.7 that you see here, it shows how we use the information from step 2 to update the production cost report. The assembly department has to account for costs associated with the following. Step 3, compute the cost per EUP. That is, the assembly department has to account for costs associated with the following. Work done last month on the 8,000 partially completed units, which is the beginning work in process. Work done this month to complete the 8,000 partially completed units, and work done this month on the 42,000 units that were started into production. The weighted average method combines the beginning work in process costs and the costs added during the period into one cost pool. What is a cost pool? A cost pool is an accumulation of individual costs. The total costs to be accounted for include direct materials and conversion costs and will be calculated as the beginning work in process cost plus costs added during the period. The next step is to calculate the cost per equivalent unit of production. Computations are required for both direct materials and conversion costs. Here you see the direct materials, the conversion costs, and the total. The beginning work in process, you have the 9,800 direct materials, conversion cost 3,910, total cost is 13,710. You see the cost added during the period and the total cost to account for, you have $40,000 direct materials, $68,000 conversion costs, which brings a total of $208,000. So the assembly department has $208,000 of cost to account for. You have the $140,000 in direct materials costs and the $68,000 in conversion costs. In step 2, we computed equivalent unit of production for direct materials as 50,000 EUP and conversion costs as 42,500 EUP. Because the equivalent units of production differ, we must compute a separate cost per equivalent unit of production for direct materials and for conversion costs. So the cost per equivalent unit of production for direct materials is $2.80 per EUP. And the total cost per equivalent unit of production for conversion costs is $1.60 per EUP. Here you see in Exhibit 3-8, it shows the cost per equivalent unit added to the production cost report. There's the production cost report for Puzzle Me, the Assembly Department, month ended July 31st, 2024. To assign the cost of the two inputs to the two outputs, this step must be repeated 4 times to assign direct material costs to completed units and in-process units, and also conversion costs to completed units and in-process units. Here is step 4. You're assigning the cost to units completed and units in process. Again, the cost must be divided between the two outputs. 40,000 completed puzzle boards that have been transferred out to the cutting department. Then you have the 10,000 partially completed puzzle boards remaining in the assembly department, ending work in process inventory. So this is accomplished by multiplying the cost per equivalent unit of production, which was step 3, by the equivalent units of production, which was step 2. So the cost accounted for is equal to the EUP times the cost per equivalent unit. So the 40,000 equivalent units times the $2.80 per equivalent unit is equal to $112,000. Okay, so we have accomplished our goal of splitting the $208,000 total cost between the completed units and the in-process units. And now we can record these costs onto the production cost report. So you have here direct materials completed, 40,000 EUP times $2.80 per EUP is 112,000. In process, 10,000 EUP times $2.80 per EUP is your 28,000. Total direct materials, $140,000. Conversion costs, you have the completed 40,000 EUP times $1.60 per EUP, which is 64,000. And in process, 2,500 EUP times 160 is equal to your 4,000. The total is $1,000. Here you see the completed production cost report for the assembly department, month ended July 31st, 2024. Section for the units, the equivalent units. And here you see the costs. You have your direct materials, conversion costs for both. And this is the end of part 1 of process costing, part 1. Please stay tuned for part 2 of process costing.
Thank you for watching. And please, if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button below.